Hello, and welcome to At Your End Step. My name is Morgan, and I'm here with Mike.
Hello.
And we have another fun-filled episode for you folks this time around. It's episode 250, so
250.
congratulations on making it to 250, Mike.
You know what? They said I would die by 63, so I'm pretty excited to be here.
We're glad to anyone who's been listening for the show since episode 1. Yeah, first of all, since episode 1, God bless you, because it is rough.
I don't think you exist. I'm gonna be honest.
You're an imaginary
Those first
entity.
10 to 15ish episodes are so bad. I know I'm suggesting these ones are good, but bear with me.
They're better.
They're better. But at the very least, you can understand the words I say, and you don't get weird sounds from Skype cutting out.
That's true. We really appreciate all the listeners, and this is a big episode for us just because it's going to be another set review show. So it's going to be the Ravnica Allegiance-PALOOZA. Yeah, of course. I was so
ready, and you kept tripping over it. Like, come on, man! Just get to the Palooza part.
So we do have an additional destination for our podcast. So we might have some new listeners that may not have listened to us before. So with that, we kind of do want to give a rundown about what our Paloozas are going to be. We are going to look at primarily constructed possibilities. So that's going to be our focus. So we're going to talk about a lot of rares. A lot of mythic rares.
Yeah, we don't talk about every card. This is not we don't do a full set review card by card. We go through and pick the cards that we think are going to have at least a chance.
Correct.
So does that mean we can miss some?
Of course.
Yeah, we have
100%. We've missed some. We've gotten some wrong. Really, you're just here because we're kind of funny. And then by the end of this, well, not so much anymore, but used to be. By the end of them, we would just be delirious.
It's true.
But we've taken a more measured approach to doing these for the most part. So hopefully, we will not have that necessary delirium at the end of them. But
no, that was a different set.
Yeah, that's very true. So that's our main focus. We also like to talk about potential cube cards or battle box cards.
Yeah, if something strikes the mood, though, honestly, there's some good cards in this set, but I don't think I put anything specifically battle box oriented this time.
But so not this time, but potentially in the future. And that's pretty much it. We break it down by color and type. So usually color and then lands we break out separately, and multicolor we break out separately.
Right. The other thing, too, we have to look at is some cards will get a special mention just because of their application in Arena, specifically in Best of 1, because some cards may be good, but could be better or even much better in a Best of 1 format. So,
right.
Which we haven't had to look at before, honestly. It's the first time we've done this with... Guilds was on Arena, but this is the first time that we've both played a fair amount of Arena. Those who have listened before know that I'm still not a huge fan of what it's done. I'm glad that Best of 3 is coming to Ranked, but I have played a ton of it recently. I have enjoyed just playing it for free, which is nice, and chaining drafts.
That's one thing that you can definitely do in that. We also typically with our shows do have a bit of a breakdown between a community news section and then a competitive section. We won't be doing that for this episode. So after we get to 252 technically, because this is going to be broken up into two different halves as well. When we're done doing the set review, that's when we'll kind of go back to our regular programming, as it were. But by that time, we'll have new standard to talk about a whole bunch.
Columbus, Indianapolis.
So close enough. Without further ado, let's just jump in right into it. And we're actually going to start with something I don't think we've actually started with before. We're going to start with lands.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them here.
Well, there's definitely 5 very relevant ones that we want to bring up and talk about, which are the 5 remaining shock lands. So we have Hallowed Fountain, Blood Crypt, Breeding Pool, Godless Shrine, and Stomping Ground. Yeah. And these obviously fill out the set we already have in Standard, and their implications are just about the same. They are going to have they're going to provide very stellar mana bases for the decks that we have in Standard. Now we have full check lands and full shock lands. And if you don't know this, they work fairly well together.
Good friends.
Very, very good friends. So I don't really have anything else to say other than your Juns, your the
I mean,
Bants,
any
Sultai,
any of the shards, yeah.
they get a lot better and a lot more viable in this with these being introduced.
I think it is interesting that so we've had these mana bases before, specifically when we had Return to Ravnica before, we had very solid 3-color mana bases. One thing that they avoided giving us this time are any really, really good hybrid colored creatures.
Correct.
Yeah, we had a cycle before that all were very, now granted they were also good because we ended up getting Devotion, but they all would have seen play otherwise. When you have Boros Reckoner or the 2/3 flyer that was it would have attacked. You got to play a creature off the library.
The Spectre.
Yeah, Night Veil Spectre.
Night Veil Spectre.
Yeah. So I mean, you had some of these interesting cards seeing that, and I think they this time purposely it does seem like they have, because those cards get insanely easy to cast in these shard mana bases. I think it's kind of interesting. Now we could still get something like that in War for the Spark, which is ostensibly still Ravnica themed because it'll be on the plane. But
right,
which also War of the Spark. Woo-hoo!
Yeah, I guess that's something to note in this little bit is we do have the next set name, so definitely going to be some battles happening there. So the only other land that we want to talk about is Plaza of Harmony, which says, let me pull up the actual card.
I can do it. When Plaza of Harmony enters the battlefield, if you control 2 or more gates, you gain 3 life. Tap, add a generic mana to your mana pool. Then tap, add 1 mana of any color that a gate you control could produce. So it's a reflecting pool for gates.
Yeah, and this is cool for a lot of different reasons. So I think in something like Commander, it's pretty nifty because you have the potentiality. If you are a 5-color Commander deck, you have another access to a 5-color land. If you're playing something like Gateway Plaza, right?
Right.
Which does work with this land very well. Some of your mana bases, depending on what you're doing, might also be stretched a little bit. So you might be playing some gates. So theoretically, you could play this or really push your mana base and play something like 5-color with this land potentially. Or another alternative, which some people have already started doing, is having a gate-based deck, because there are a lot of cards that care about gates between the previous set and this set.
I want to see a Guild Summit deck.
It's potential. It has potential there. It has a possibility because instead of having Maze's End, which is the only deck that you could really play that required having a lot of gates, you still have a lot of cards that care about gates in these 2 sets, which broaden what you can actually feasibly do. Which is pretty important if you're trying to build a mana base that's going to have a lot of tap lands. So you want to have a big payoff for doing that.
Right. I do think it's awkward. This isn't a gate. I know why it's not, but it is weird. I like that. I think the key thing with this is if there is a gate deck, the 3 life you gain is going to be important about this card because obviously gates all come into play tapped. If you're playing Gateway Plaza, you're eating a whole mana with that, just like any Rupture Spire effect. So this coming down and gaining 3 life and then being any mana essentially you might want that turn is a pretty big deal with that. So our mana bases are going to be so good. The gate deck will need to show that it's more than gimmicky, and it's probably just gimmicky. But this could be an important card.
Definitely something to keep your eye on. Again, when you have lands that can produce any color, that they have the potential of being busted. Let's move on then to colorless. Is going to be, and I think these are all just artifacts, correct?
Yeah, they're all artifacts.
Okay. The first one that we want to talk about is Glass of the Guild Pact. So
Glass of the Guild Pact is 2 generic for an artifact. Multicolored creatures you control get +1/+1. So it's a cheap anthem for multicolored creatures. I don't know specifically if this is a standard card yet or not. We do have some pretty good multicolored creatures, but you have to have a high amount of them. But if you look at older formats, specifically modern, there's a lot of decks that run around that are that could take advantage of this. There's actually a player local to us in Columbus who has been running the 5-color creature deck forever. And honestly, it was kind of one of the things that led into when you start seeing decks like Humans. And Humans itself, there's another card in this set in white that we'll talk about, the Hero Precinct 1, that also cares about multicolored creatures, it itself being white. But I think that you could build in such a way that this anthem is interesting.
For sure. And there theoretically could be enough creatures that you could build a Mardu deck or something like that has a lot of multicolored creatures that we will be talking about, I think, on the next episode of this. But there is potential for this having implications in standard, and hopefully with the next set we'll have a critical mass.
Yeah, right.
And really push you to wanting to play this in some facet. So it's something that to keep your eye on. It may not find a home just yet, but it definitely has. Especially in combination with the white card that we're going to be talking about later, could be interesting.
Yeah, so there are cards that are going to be in the format that make it maybe a little awkward. I think of Bedevil, which we'll get to, or even like things like Conclave Tribunal. But which is like, wait, is that only creatures? No, that's a permanent, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so but again, it could be powerful enough.
Next up, we have a reprint. If I'm not mistaken, we have Scrabbling Claws.
Yeah, from original Mirrodin of all places, or also known as Bad Relic Progenitus.
Unfortunately, but there can't be any Progenitus on Ravnica, so we can have some Scrabbling Claws though. It's one generic for an artifact. It says it has 2 activated abilities. It's tap, target player exiles a card from their graveyard, and it says pay 1 generic, sacrifice Scrabbling Claws, exile target card from a graveyard, draw a card. So
now, to be fair, I said worse Relic Progenitus. It does leave your graveyard alone.
That's
so
true.
Maybe it's not just worse, but
I think this is an important card to have access to. It's going to be a sideboard card if it is played, but being able to hit cards and be able to control a graveyard in some facet with things like Undergrowth or some of the reanimate spells that we have
or
in
just
the format.
as a Phoenix, like
that's true too.
And also like Terramander, which is a card we'll talk about that you might want to get things out of the graveyard for.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, and we have a couple versions of this in standard right now, which is crazy to say because we went so long without seeing any versions of this. But a couple of the other versions of this do require you to pay mana, like when you are exiling a card from their graveyard, and this one just being able to tap and just work every turn is a pretty low investment. So I think Scrabbling Claws has seen play even in modern and still does every now and then. So it has a chance at standard.
Yeah,
I mean, pure sideboard card.
Yeah, you can't necessarily main deck this, but graveyard hate is important to know what we have within the format just in case something does break out and get out of hand, so you can adjust your sideboards for the next tournament you'll be in. And the last colorless card we have.
Hold on, just take a minute. If you're looking at the digital spoiler, take a minute to look at the horror that is Screaming Shield.
Yeah, this is a disturbing card.
Just like, why would you want this? Like, oh, here comes that jerk Jeff with a Screaming Shield. Hey guys!
With a stupid loud shield. Hey, buddy, turn your shield down. Good lord.
Hey, my shield's really cool, so like it will never break. Awkwardly, though, it does feel pain.
Forever.
Apparently. If you hit it, I'm a shield. If you strike me, do I not bleed? No. Well, I scream.
I scream. But that is...
Maybe it just wants ice cream.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, it's got a mouth, so I assume you could feed it.
Oh, God. There's so many questions. Anyways, all right.
Yeah, okay. Tome of the Guild pack.
This is 5 generic for an artifact. Whenever you cast a multicolored spell, draw a card, and you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color. This is pretty expensive, and we have something in the format Gilded Lotus, which is fringe playable. Was more playable before all the artifacts rotated.
Yeah.
But that rider is pretty interesting. We just talked about the gates and the possibility of a deck that wants to really stretch its mana base. 5-color control has been a deck that's existed before, and Maze's End was a deck, as we already mentioned in the last format. Obviously, a win condition like that, but this card is a snowball effect.
Yeah.
When you think of literally, I went through this. I go through, and then Morgan and I will go through and cultivate the spreadsheet for what cards we're going to talk about. There isn't a split card in this set that I left off the list.
No, they're all pretty good.
Yeah, like they all have at least something playable about them. Maybe like the rare Rakdos one is not so great, but even the front half is just like a removal spell.
Yeah, exactly.
So, if you think about how good those modal cards are, and then you start thinking about how many of them say draw a card attached to them, it starts getting kind of, that's a lot of spells you could chain together. So this is expensive and requires a very specific deck to do it. And the 5-drop slot, that draws cards, you're fighting against things even like Teferi, but I think it's spicy.
Now, but you can cast your Teferi and draw a card though, and that must feel pretty good.
Ooh.
So
I got all warm inside.
So it's all the artifacts. There aren't very many to talk about typically in these sets in the first place. But we'll move on here and move into white, which I'll be upfront, did get a lot of cards.
Not what I would call playable cards.
I think that the ones that we are going to talk about are pretty good, though.
Agreed. And the first one's a house.
Yeah, no joke. So the first one we have is Angel of Grace, which is 3 generic white for a 5/4 flash flying creature angel. And it says, when this creature enters the battlefield until end of turn, damage that will reduce your life total to less than 1 reduces it to 1 instead. Now that text might seem familiar because it is Angel's Grace, which is a pretty good Magic card. Now, it doesn't have split second, but that's all right. Not a mechanic in Ravnica Allegiance. It also has an activated ability.
Probably in Magic again.
Probably not. Not really fun when you can't interact with the spell in the stack. And it also has an activated ability of 4 generic white exile Angel of Grace from your graveyard, and your life total becomes 10. So flash flying is pretty good. Not dying is also pretty good.
If you played through Avacyn, you know that when your opponent has 5 mana up and a lot of white, and you go, man,
you got one of them Avacyns, don't you?
Now, granted, the indestructible was nice for Avacyn, but yeah, also if you're just like, okay, think about how many of I think about the deck that could play this immediately. Like Boros Angels is already a deck. You get into races with that deck. You know what I mean? And then when you set up there where your opponent has to make the decision, like, am I going for it here? Like, am I trying to get you? And you're like, actually, I'm going to flash this in. Oh, and you attacked all your guys, so I'm not just going to, get you.
Yeah.
Or, like, you flash in and you block, you don't die, and then you gain 10 life. You know what I mean? Or you gain 9 life. I do think that it being an ETB is a little bit awkward because your timing can, you have to be careful if you're at a low life total because they can respond.
Yeah.
But stats are good. Cast is good. Flash is great. This is going to see play somewhere. It's fighting with some good cards. Lyra Dawnbringer still in the format, but
and that's when you just like, why not both people?
Yeah, we just play them all the angels,
all the angels all the time, and like there are a lot of angels between these two sets that really you could play like an Orzhov Angel tribal deck.
Gosh, yeah.
Like you could just do it, and you'd be pretty all right. In all honesty,
I'd watch that show. Lyra's Angels.
Lyra's Angels. Yeah, I mean, seems like it'd have probably a pretty good plot. So next up we have Forbidding Spirit.
Forbidding Spirit. This is a generic white for a 3/3 Spirit Cleric. When it enters the battlefield, until your next turn, whenever a creature your opponent control would attack you, they have to pay 2 for each of those creatures. So this is Propaganda. This is Ghostly Prison.
Yeah.
Or Windborn Muse on a creature. I think, and Morgan even asked before, it's like, this is one we need to talk about. I don't think we have to spend too much time on it. I think that it's a 3-mana 3/3 that shuts down an attack. And I think for the deck that's trying to bridge to the late game, this is a fine, sideboard card. But I also think when you start looking at what the format's doing, I looked at this card in context of either 1, do we get something to flicker some things, or 2, Vanifar. Our birthing pod creature that we'll talk about in gold. This is a perfect kind of thing to chain to get you to another turn to get to keep chaining.
That is true. I'll give you that for sure.
So it's just the kind of card that's innocuous. It makes me think of the Loxodon, the Stonehorn Dignitary,
yeah.
that also saw play in pod style decks. Now, granted, we had Restoration Angel then, which is a big deal.
Stonehorn Dignitary is a rhino person. It's a rhino monk.
Yeah, but I'm saying like it was the same idea where you just
not
played.
Not a Loxodon. You said a Loxodon.
Oh, did I? Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, jeez.
Ooh.
They don't all look the same. It's rude.
That's racist. I'm very sorry. Or speciesist? I don't even know. I don't know.
We apologize.
Leathery skin.
We apologize to all the Loxodons out there. It's our bad.
You can send your mail if you can do that. Like send us. I want it. I want that letter,
please.
But yeah. So again, I think it's the kind of thing. Like what's the horse, the white horse that has protection from red? Is that right? Shieldmare.
Yeah.
That's awesome play out of sideboards, and I think I would play this over Shieldmare in a lot of aggressive matchups.
Sure.
I think about even like mono blue, like where this can turn off like Curious Obsession sometimes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like those are the things where I think it's at least interesting.
Yeah, no, I'll agree with you on that. Like that's a pretty big deal. Sometimes.
I mean, yeah, sometimes. I mean, it's again, it's not a perfect card, but that historically that line of text has been good no matter where it's been printed.
Yeah.
So and a 3/3 for 3 is good for what you're doing.
Yeah. And it's not like Baird, which is 1, which may or may not really
Right.
affect the board state. 2 is paying 2 per creature is a bigger deal. But next up, we have probably, I might go on a limb and say, has the potential to be the best card in white,
Yeah, I would assume it does.
which is Hero of Precinct 1. And this is going to be a generic white for a 2/2 human warrior. It says, whenever you cast a multicolored spell, create a 1/1 human creature token. That I mean, like that. First of all, has a lot of synergy with a lot of different creatures that are already currently in standard. It has a lot of synergy with obviously a lot of spells that are good with said creatures. But there is already like an archetype that people love to build if it presents itself, which is aristocrats.
Right.
And this is where this perfectly slides in. There have also been some modern implications for this card, potentially inside of Modern Humans. I'm not sure if it really fits because you're not necessarily always casting your creatures.
Right.
And going wide doesn't really, it's not going to really affect you for the most part. Sometimes, like obviously, but it will, especially if you have, it has good interactions with Lieutenant in the Humans decks. But most of the time, it just feels like a win more. I don't know.
I don't know either. Like looking at this like a 2/2 for 2, I would never want to play it. That's you know what I mean. But man, that line of text is interesting, and I think there's when you look at how you could build, I think there's the green merfolk that it's the 1/1 that whenever you cast a non-creature spell, right, you get +1/+1 counter.
Yeah.
And people were like, oh, that's the next coming of like here we go with whatever dryad it was, and like but it didn't happen. And here's where it's like, man, this looks like it's close. But I don't know if we have enough gold creatures that are white centered. You really have to stretch to play this. Now, luckily, it's not white.
Yeah, I think that would probably push it a little bit more out of contention.
But it is an intriguing card that definitely says build around me and play me on turn 2 and get rewarded. And I think that's interesting. So, I do want to quickly mention we didn't put this on the list, but for aristocrats, we should at least mention Impassioned Orator. It's a generic and a white for a 2/2. Human cleric, and it says whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain a life.
Yeah.
Soul Warden effects are normally better when they're both sides, but depending on the way that the Aristocrats deck is built, if it needs more life to sacrifice things, if you're playing, I don't know, giant 4/4 demons that want to ping you every turn, this is a way to stay alive with that.
Yeah.
So it may just be the kind of filler you see, but those kind of cards that with that line of text do tend to play a role. So,
All right. Next up, we have what was that?
Migrant of Obligation.
Migrant of Obligation.
Now this is the card for aristocrats. No, I left down. Migrant of Obligation. Or sorry, I said migrant. Man, my phone autocorrected
Oh, is it
that.
Ministrant?
Yeah,
okay, that's why that's like
Yeah, I was
don't know
really
what that card
confused.
is.
Ministrant of Obligation. 2 generic and a white for a 2/1 human cleric that has Afterlife 2. So you're gonna 2/1 for 3, which is not great rate, but when it dies,
Yeah.
you get in 2 little flying guys.
This is the equivalent, not necessarily equivalent to, but close to like something like Lingering Souls.
Yeah, I mean you're not wrong, and that's free to get your 2/1s. Now we have a couple of things in standard now. They're going to have exile clauses to them. We still have like Lava Coil, things like that. But if your deck has sacrifice outlets, these are good. And I don't know if you know this, but 1/1 Spirits of Flying historically
people.
been very good.
Yeah, just kill people.
I've got to play this card in Limited already a couple times because Arena and MTGO gave us Ravnica Allegiance early, and
Sure.
it's real good. It just trades with something, and oh look, it's back.
Yeah, now I have 2 evasive threats that are small but can still just take you down over time. Yeah.
I do enjoy the fact that the implication of this card is that it was 2 ghosts in a trench coat.
Just like trying to sneak past you.
It's like, wait a second, you can't get into this movie. You're 2 ghosts.
That's ridiculous. And I think this is going to be the last white card. It's going to be Tithe Taker.
Smothering. Oh no, that's not.
No, that's not it.
Treasure Vomit is not.
No,
oh,
it's
okay.
not that. No Tithe Taker, which is one of the first cards. Oh no, the second to last card. Excuse me, second to last card. Which is Tithe Taker is one of the first cards that we saw spoiled. It is 1 and a white for a 1 generic and a white for a 2/1 human soldier. It says during your turn, spells your opponent cast cost 1. One generic more to cast, and abilities your opponents activate cost 1 generic more to activate unless they're mana abilities. And this card has Afterlife 1 as well. This is a whole lot of value for like kind of a small package. I mean, making your it puts your opponent in pretty awkward spots to be able to like curve out, and it really shines against your. I really feel it shines against your control matchups. If you're playing something like a White Weenie deck, having things like Cellular Wreckage cost 1 more can be pretty big. Having counter spells cost 1 more can also be pretty big.
Having Teferi cost 1 more.
Well, that's on their turn. It's only.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
you're
it's
right.
only.
Never
Only
mind.
affects,
Not flashing that in, I guess.
only affect. Yeah, don't please. If there's a way to give Teferi Flash in any future set, just no. But this little bit of a taxing effect can be like a deal breaker.
I like it that one of the major representatives of the Orzhov Guild forces the Azorius to play the Azorius mechanic correctly. That's actually super flavorful. It's like, well, hold on, you should use that with addendum because you're not gonna cast it on my turn.
Nah, you need a piece of paper, please. You need to file some more things.
Yeah, you got taxes.
You got taxes, bud. But I really like this card. I think like White Weenie or Boros Weenie is already a very strong archetype, so this can definitely find a home. If it's not main deck, maybe even sideboard against those certain matchups. But I think this card's effective. And again, Afterlife is just icing on the cake. You know, just surviving a wrath after you push this out or something like that is really, really good, especially when you can like follow it up with like an Anthem effect or something of that nature.
Now, I think this one has a higher, in my opinion, has a higher chance of seeing play in humans than the hero does.
Yeah,
I
can see that.
Now, granted, obviously there are some decks that they're just okay. Like if it's the tax isn't on their turn, this doesn't do anything against like Ironworks, for example. But though by the time this goes up, maybe that won't matter.
Maybe, who knows?
But I do think like it has a chance there, and Afterlife's pretty important there too. You know what I mean? Like invalidating a bolt is pretty strong. Like it just is. So I think you might see it there. So
I can see it. Okay, now we're on our last white card. So the last card we're going to talk about in white is Unbreakable Formation.
This is sorry, I thought you just read the last one.
You can read that. I just read the name.
Okay, you started to breathe like you were going to read again though. Stay in your lane, bro.
A man's got to breathe. All right.
Questionable. 2 generic and a white for an instant. Creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. Addendum: if you cast a spell during your main phase, put a +1/+1 counter on each of those creatures, and they gain vigilance until end of turn. Now we already have Take a Stand is already in the format. Was first printed in Oath of the Gatewatch. I think it's in the Core 19, which is a creature you get +1/+0 and indestructible. So it's not like it's a new effect that we haven't had, but that card's already seen play. And in mirror matches, like creature mirrors, especially in some of the Boros Go Wide strategies, this card looks like a beating to me. Especially like if you're playing the Aristocrats deck too, with like Afterlife, you've got a bunch of 1/1 spirits. Like, oh, I just get this free attack. People are already trying to see how they can shoehorn things like Song of Freyalise into a bunch of decks. Song of Freyalise gives you the mana advantage, but this just gives you a third portion of it like for free. You're just like,
exactly.
Oh man, I'm getting in here. All my guys are bigger. It being most of these effects normally give +1/+1 until end of turn or something like that. Them being counters, just like I think you get to play this card in more points of the game than you traditionally would like. Make a stand or take a stand, I should say.
Right, like this really helps it function as more of a game ender than a defensive card.
100%.
And I think like that's important when you're evaluating this card. Is obviously can save you from certain wraths, not all of them, but certain ones. But this permanently pumping something allows you to get that attack in, have indestructible, but then still have. Hopefully evasive threats or something else that can just finish the game. So this makes it look more like you're overrun than those typical cards would. Because those typically those cards, we have a Conqueror's Pledge. Like that's the overrun effect we have.
You mean Pride of Conquerors?
Pride of Conquerors, yeah.
We're close at card names. Deal with it.
Yeah, sometimes we're off. That sees play in sort of the mono white versions of the Weenie deck, and that gives you instant sleep +2/+2. But I think permanent buff and indestructible are just better. And I feel like you can play this in more strategies as well. I feel like this could be a good card for like if Celestia Tokens is still a deck in the format. It seems pretty good in that deck.
End of turn, cast
March of the
March of
Multitudes,
Multitude for a
untap,
bunch.
breakable formation. So like you make a bunch of soldiers, and then like you have like one like Azorius lieutenant that's like, all right, attention.
You 300 them up. All right, Shield Wall, let's go. Again, maybe Settle the Wreckage makes this not playable, and 3 mana is a lot, but this effect is already playable without the addendum, and addendum makes this kind of busto sometimes.
All right, listen, here's what we do. We play this card in a Naya tokens deck, and then we...
With Gruul's... Yeah, I was already thinking it. Oh, Morgan, you read my mind. Oh, man.
That sounds great. Let's do that.
Do we have a Naya mana base that will work?
I think so.
All right, we're going to take a break. We have a deck to build.
We'll be right back.
Hey, also shout out to Alphonse Elric for making it onto a Magic card.
Yeah.
He's the Watchful Giant.
All right. So that was white. Again, we only had 6 cards to really talk about. But you don't necessarily expect to talk about a whole bunch of cards in a multicolored set.
And that's fair. And I think there's some cards that maybe you could see something done with, maybe Angelic Exaltation, I don't know. But yeah, white does seem, I don't know, even some of the cards we talked about were close to, like, I don't know, it may never see play. So
It's definitely something that we definitely missed something, and we'll be surprised when it's like, oh, okay. So don't be surprised when something else pops up and is nuts or something like that. So at least I won't be shocked.
yeah, that's fair.
All right, moving on. We're going to go ahead and start on blue. So we have Benthic Biomancer. Is one blue, so just blue, excuse me, for a 1/1 Merfolk Wizard Mutant with Adapt. So 1 Adapt for 1 for generic and blue. And Adapt is you could pay this cost and put a 1/1 counter on it if it doesn't have counters on it currently. And then it says, whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on Benthic Biomancer, draw a card, then discard a card. So it's a counter looter. So that's why we see like the cheap activation cost. You know, you can turn to activate it, make it 2/2, draw a card, discard a card, and attack for 2. Like that seems all right.
I think it being a Merfolk really gives it a chance. You know, I was trying to figure out where you play this, and Deep-Root Champion is the card that comes to mind.
100%.
You know, that whenever another Merfolk comes into play, you can put a counter. It's not on itself; it's on a Merfolk.
Yes.
So you can start piling on this and keep looting through your Merfolk deck, which is pretty spicy. Merfolk made a bit of a splash at the beginning of Ixalan. But I know, like, I think cards like Kumena have gone on a bit of a run. I know some people are pretty excited about Zagana, for example. So you know, maybe this is a part of that sort of build that does that.
I mean, obviously that's a heavy focus of both the Simic and the Merfolk in the Ixalan block. So if it has a chance, it's going to be within this set or the next set to really have a critical mass of Merfolk to really get off the ground.
Also pretty good with a card that's getting a bit of buzz right now, Hadana's Climb.
Yeah.
So that, if you don't remember Hadana's Climb, it was the blue-green enchantment flip land from Rivals of Ixalan, and it says at the beginning of your combat step, put a counter on a creature you control. So seems fine. So I was kind of unimpressed with this card, but I think there's enough things around it that when somebody plays it, I'm not going to be like, oh, okay, that's crazy. No, it's fine.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Essence Capture, which is blue instant counter target creature spell. Put a +1/+1 counter on up to one target creature you control. So hey, it's worse or better Essence Scatter depending on your. We don't have to spend too much time with this. If you want to play Essence Scatter, you can. I think the interesting thing with this card is obviously things like Benthic Biomancer, cards that care about counters, but also we literally have a mono blue aggro deck in the format that, you know, this is just they already play Essence Scatter. This is just a strict upgrade. They're only playing islands.
Yeah, so they're not going to have the run into mana issues trying to cast this.
So yeah, if you get to cast this and put a counter on any of your creatures, but especially one of your unblockable creatures or something that has a Curious Obsession on it, you probably feel pretty good.
Yeah, it's just just an upgrade.
So I think I'll see play, but I think that's probably the only place it sees play. It kind of reminds me of, what was the Teamer one from Khan's block?
Yeah, I can't remember what
like
it was.
Trap Essence or something like that. And it was like counter a creature, and then you could put counters on a guy. So that makes sense.
All right, next up we have a blue mythic. It is Mesmerizing Benthid. Generic blue for a 4/5 octopus. It says when this creature enters the battlefield, create 2/0/2 blue illusion creature tokens with whenever this creature blocks a creature that creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. It says Mesmerizing Benthid, Benthid, excuse me, has hexproof as long as you control an illusion.
So this is the octopus form of Regal Caracol.
Yes. Gotcha. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. I mean, it's got a little bit of bigger stats of 4/5, so that that's a little bit better. And unfortunately, we don't have very many illusions in the format currently. But there is a planeswalker that does make illusions currently in the format,
which is hilarious.
So we do have Jace, Cunning Castaway, that synergizes at least with it. I don't know if that's worth.
No, it doesn't.
Worth really trying.
It doesn't synergize with it at all, actually.
What? I mean, it makes illusions.
That doesn't. Okay, great, you did it.
That's the only way I know how to get more illusions.
I don't think anything needs to synergize with it. You get 3 bodies, 2. All of them are pretty good defensive ones, and they slow somebody down. And this is your roadblock on the way to doing the real thing you want to do.
Fair enough.
And I think for control decks, you want to board into, like I said, like Regal Caracol was the one. Now, granted, had lifelink, but this slows them down longer, if that makes sense. And then for ramp decks that are trying to get to maybe your Hydroid Crassus, for example, you play this on turn 4. You got some time.
Yeah,
you got time. So
and they can't just like immediately answer that body.
No,
which is obviously big.
No, it's too many legs to answer that body.
too many legs. All right.
Hey, shout out to the jerk who's definitely going to beat me at FNM with a Persistent Petitioners deck.
I mean, shout out to Persistent Petitioners ruining Pauper on Magic Arena for like the next 1,000,000 years. Good job. Good job, Wizards. Who thought like that would be a good idea to do? They already literally printed Rat Colony, which did the same thing. And now you're like, oh, cool, we have 2 of these.
And now we can see the epic
I have to play
battle.
against both Rat Colony and...
But when they play against each other... Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, stop it.
I like the idea of a persistent advisor, too, where it's just like, hey, you should do this. No, I don't think so. You should do this.
What if I get more people to tell you should do this?
Just each day adds a person.
You should do this.
Hey, we should start Space Force. No, that's a weird idea.
That's a weird idea. Don't stop that.
All right, fine. 60 of you can leave. Next card is Precognitive Perception. 3 generic blue for an instant. Draw 3 cards. So Jace's Ingenuity. Oh, but wait. There's an addendum. I get it because it's more. If you cast this card during your main phase, instead scry 3, then draw 3 cards. So we just left a format where any deck that was running blue wanted to probably cast Glimmer of Genius at some point during the game. And I do mean any deck. Even the Team Manager decks are playing Glimmer. So
yeah, good card.
This card isn't quite that. Obviously, being 5 mana is fine. But Jace's Ingenuity and variants of it have seen play for every time they've been printed. And that sort of splits the needle or between Glimmer and what we had in Dragonlord Prerogative before that. But this one really does encourage you to play it on your main. Like, if you're digging for something, and this is what you're going to cast, then you scry 3, draw 3. You get to look at a lot of cards.
I think like this is close to probably like the perfect addendum card. It really feels like.
Agreed.
With what their design philosophy was for it, which was you play it at instant speed because you need to play your normal control game
because you're holding up your counterspell and you settle the wreckage.
And then once you have control, you play it on your main phase to close out the game. So I think I definitely think it's though good enough. And most of the preliminary like control lists have at least 1 or 2 of these inside of them. So.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see like how this compares to like Chemistry's Insight, which we have now, because that being 2 spells, but technically only 3 cards across it. Like, I wonder how the play pattern will go with that at 4 versus 5 mana. But I agree. It does everything that the control decks want you to do. This is purely standard, but a good card.
Sure.
It is weird to see a bunch of uncommons become rares, though. Like the white card we talked about, the formation, and this, like those are uncommon effects that addendum. Like literally, it was just like, you know what? Let's go ahead and run it through the Senate again. we'll do some pork barrel additions to it, and now it's rare.
Yeah.
Oh, weird.
Look, we slapped a new stereo in it. Now it's an upgrade.
We tinted Jason Ingenuity's windows. Now it's a rare.
All right. Next card we have is Terramander. It's
That's
one
my
blue.
favorite Power Ranger.
It's 1 blue for a 1/1 with flying. It's a Salamander Drake. It has 7 blue, adapt 4. It says, obviously we know what adapt does. And it says, this ability costs 1 generic less to activate for each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. It fairly, it synergizes really well with, the blue-red, Drake's deck that we have in the current format, and could potentially impact something like Modern
and Legacy. I'm gonna be honest. This is gonna
and
impact
Legacy,
Legacy too. Like Legacy, man. For both of those formats, why you got kill Probe? As a mono red Phoenix player, why you got kill Probe? What did we ever do to you?
Card's busted.
Yeah, of course
You should be thankful you have Gut Shot, so at least you could kill this thing.
Hey, no, I played Death Shadows like Zoo when I had Probe. I will take it back and go back to winning on turn 2 and 3. Thank you very much.
I bet you would.
No, I think this card is very, very good. Like it is interesting when these cards like see play in Standard because Delver saw play in Standard, but a lot of these kind of cards are kind of iffy. But this is really, really good. This is you don't lose. Most of the time when you have an effect like this, you lose like Delve or something else. Like you have to like sacrifice something for it. Here, like you get to even keep the spells in there. You don't have to do anything to your graveyard.
Like the closest thing was what Cryptic Serpent.
Yes.
But even then, you didn't get a discount up front.
No, you didn't get to like cast it because here's the
Right.
thing: when you're playing like in Standard, if you're playing, is it Drakes, is it Phoenix, whatever have you? If your turn 1 is just this, right? Well, then like cool, you can just start attacking. You know what I mean? Most of the Standard decks are running Charter Course, so like this is an enabler for Charter Course too. In Legacy format or in older formats, Legacy and Modern, this is probably slots in right next to. This I've already seen a bunch of is it Phoenix builds for Modern that has slotted this card right in because most of those decks have been trying to figure out what to do instead of Monastery Swiftspear. Like they don't like that card.
Yeah, there you go.
Here you go.
You have a perfect replacement.
Yeah, this is it's crazy when you get like these kind of uncommons that are again most of the time when you see a card that's like okay, well this is going to do anything in Standard, but in other formats. But then you look at this one, and you're like, man, it's going to kind of be everywhere. So. Yeah, Terramander looks great.
Yeah, I'm just glad it is an uncommon, not like a rare, and having like a super ballooned price because of it. So, man.
Yeah, it definitely would. Its pre-order price would be crazy.
Right.
So, next up is Quench.
Quench your spell, the Thirst Quencher.
I gotta say, I really enjoy the art on this because Quench does look like it would be like quench your thirst. You'd just be like,
I'm gonna drink this now.
This is a generic blue for an instant counter target spell unless controller pays 2, and Wansi's been trying for a long time to figure out where the 2-mana counterspell goes. Negate and Essence Scatter have been the staples. We had Revolutionary Rebuff in Kaladesh block, which was non-artifact spells, and even that saw play, even though a lot of the things getting cast were artifacts. We have Syncopate, which may still be better than this, but there's no way Quench doesn't see some amount of play.
Yeah, Syncopate scales, but sometimes it doesn't matter per se. And we also have Spell Pierce in the format too. I obviously think that Quench sees play. I think Mana Leak, if they were to like slot that in this set, would have just been like so oppressive.
I'd sell my soul for Fairies finally and just be done with it.
Yeah, exactly. Quench,
cast Fairy, untap 2. I have Mana Leak in my hand. Try to do anything.
Exactly. Quench, it feels at least a little bit more escapable.
Yeah,
as
agreed.
if you're the opponent facing this down.
Well, and the key for these cards too, like they're going to be good on 2 every single time.
Yes.
I mean they're going to be. That's how they're designed to be. But the key here is how do they scale as the game goes on. And Mana Leak is relevant much more often and much longer in games, especially in turns that require like once you want to start casting 2 spells, it still becomes relevant. Quench is something that once you've identified, you can play around it. It's a lot easier to play around. So I like that. Like hopefully this is the sweet spot for it.
I hope so. I hope that we get to see this card be sort of an evergreen effect.
I think that's what you're going to see.
I hope so.
So
because I think this is one of the tools that control decks need from rotation to rotation to stay relevant and not feel so up and down. When they get cycle out their big cards, their planeswalkers and what have you. This is like the glue that keeps it together a little bit.
From a limited perspective, there's a lot of counters in this set.
Yeah, there's a fair amount of scaling from all the way from common to rare.
Yeah, because we have Essence Capture, we just talked about this. We have a Cancel. What's the rare one? Oh, an Absorb.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just a lot of counters in this set. So, interesting.
Our next card is going to be Shimmer of Possibility. So, Shimmer of Possibility is 1 in a blue for a sorcery. It says, look at the top 4 cards of your library, put one of them in your hand, and the rest in the bottom of your library in any order. Excuse me, in a random order. My bad.
No, they don't. That's one of those changes that is literally because of Arena. While a lot of those cards just say in any order, and you could just decide in a 60-card deck or even a 40-card deck, it's probably not going to matter. So for digital purposes, it's a lot easier just to have the game decide and move on. I know we have Anticipate in the format, but one more card's a big deal. And I definitely think there's versions of blue-red spells, whatever that deck is, that this and Goblin Electromancer, 1 mana look at 4 cards to find a card, you can really start chaining spells together. Between this and Discovery and even Anticipate, you have a chance to see a lot of spells. It's important. Obviously, we have Arclight Phoenix, we have the Drake's deck, but we even have things like Gutter Snipe still in the format. So... when you talk about Gutter Snipe and you look at the card we have in red, the Skewer the Critics, for example, which is Lightning Bolt, not really, but kind of. So I think this is that kind of card where almost was a strategic planning. Was that the one? Yeah. From
look at the top 3, put 2 in your graveyard, 1 in your hand.
Yeah, we were oh, that's okay, and then all of a sudden you had blue-white. Godfarrow's Gift that was just oh no, this card is everything, and this card could be that too. Now, granted, if this card put 3 cards in the graveyard, oh please,
yeah, that'd be the truth. I think this card definitely piques your interest. Looking at the top 4, it reminds you of what Impulse,
yeah. An instant though.
Instant is definitely a big deal. I wonder if they could have bumped this up, maybe a rarity or maybe even 2, and just made an Impulse for 3.
They couldn't give you Quench and Impulse. They can't do that. Anticipate's already okay.
Yeah, so. I guess that's true. But
maybe I'm wrong, but I just don't think you could have.
Nah, I mean, you're probably right. But yeah, this card has potential.
Next up, we have Sphinx of Foresight. 2 generic blue for a 4/4 creature Sphinx. This is a really interesting line of text, though. If you may reveal this card from your hand at the beginning of the game, if you do, scry 3 during your first upkeep, and then it says it has flying, and at the beginning of your upkeep, scry 1. That's really interesting.
Yeah,
and that we haven't seen that ability too often, but every time we've seen that ability, the cards have seen play. Ley lines, obviously, but also the Chancellors. A number of the Chancellors have seen play and continue to see play. Chancellor of the Tangle sees play,
and the Annex,
and Chancellor of the Annex, right? And Chancellor of the Dross has seen some play too. So they those things like this, and here whatever your deck is trying to do, I think. Friend of the show, David Nolan, former co-host, said that anything that encourages more loose one-landers, right? Because you get to really craft your hand a little bit and craft your draw. So it's interesting. The problem is that 4-mana 4/4 flyers have been average. Even in Im and Ket, we had the Cycler, the 4/4 Sync Cycler, and I said if this card also had Cycle for 1 blue, it would be the perfect Magic card because I could use its effect and go, I don't care about this creature. I'm gonna discard it.
I even if when it hits the battlefield, having a
the Scry 1 is
that was Thassa's ability.
Yeah, right. And Eyes Everywhere, which is also in the set. They like to Scry 1 every turn.
Yeah, I think that's. It may not be super impressive, but it still could find its way into. I think it could honestly find its way into a mono blue deck, the mono blue aggressive deck.
It's possible
because the whole crux of that deck is being able to start your turns with a 1-drop and then being
Curious Obsession,
obsession, and this potentially having this in your opener really allows you to push for that perfect opening
You know,
start.
that's a good point. You know, I think like the effect is powerful enough, and there's definitely decks that this will help recover like massively from mulligans. So it'll be interesting to see where it shows up.
Yeah, if you mulligan, you get to scry, and then you get to scry 3 more.
Yeah,
That's so good. That's
Yeah,
like 4 scries before you draw your first card.
and I still missed my land drop.
Magic is dumb.
And Magic players everywhere. 2019. Last shout out to Verity Circle, which, as Morgan accurately
Zone
called,
of Truth.
What's his name? The finance guy for Star City, Chase Andres, literally said, "I cast Zone of Truth" when going through. Like he's like, "This card's worthless," but I cast Zone of Truth. And I was like,
Good.
Morgan said it first,
It's
and he
true.
did. It's in our Discord. I if you want the
We can time-
timestamp, I will get it,
We can timestamp
and
it.
then I will sue Chase Andres.
Take him to court.
I think it's Chaz Andres. I don't actually know. I'm very sorry because like I've interacted with you on Twitter many times. You're a very nice person. I don't know how to say your name. I'm gonna call you Shay Andre
Andre.
because it sounds awesome.
That's true. But that's going to be everything for blue. I always hate evaluating blue cards because I don't know. I don't know what blue cards are good. Quench is good. How about that?
And I've said this a couple more recent since they've really tried to push blue in some different directions. Because again, we had Azorius here, so that could have just been like, here's your, we have our good draw spell, here's a counter spell, move on. But
Yeah.
instead we got some, Benthic Biomancer, we got Terramander, those are, the Things of Foresight. These are interesting creatures that really sort of push blue into some different directions. And I think blue as a color always needs that. Hey, play a different play pattern than you normally would with blue.
Yeah, and like it encourages blue to be paired with other colors that aren't that really allows it to be paired with its enemy colors.
100%.
And I think like that's important for people not to like forget about and really consider like, hey, Simic is in the set. We need ways for blue to play well with creatures, which blue typically archetypally doesn't do. And I think like it's good when they do that. But yeah. Next up is black.
I will say the award for the card that has the most likely chance of doing something broken that we're not going to talk about is Awaken the Erstwhile.
Oh yeah.
Because I don't think that card's playable in Standard, and at 5 mana it's too much. But it's 5 mana, each player discards their hand and then makes that many zombies, right? But like Dredge, for example, in Modern, like they can Life for the Loam, they get a lot of cards in hand, and then here's all these zombies, I guess. I don't know. I don't think it does anything, but it could be one of those cards too where like Rally the Ancestors, like this card doesn't do anything, and you're like, oh, it's actually the most broken card in Standard.
Listen, blue-black, 9 mana. This and the cut purse, the guy that steals your tokens.
Okay.
Here we go. We figured it out, boys.
Now I'm talking. Now you're talking. Now, of course, how many cards are both players going to have in hand when we get to 9
Listen,
mana?
it doesn't matter. We could technically do this over 2 turns. It could be 4 mana, play the cut purse.
No, the cut purse ability is only it's a 1/2.
ETB? Oh no. Okay, 9 mana. This is garbage. Moving on.
So we flicker it because we can use there's a 2 mana white flicker.
Yeah.
So then
There's-
7 mana.
So we're moving into a third color.
All right. Anyways, I think Cry of the Carnarium was our first one.
Yes, correct. This is our Infest variant for the set. So it's 1 generic black for sorcery. It's all creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. Exile all creature cards in all graveyards that were put into the put there from the battlefield this turn. If a creature would die this turn, exile it instead. So it's really worded kind of weird, but it covers kind of everything.
Flaying Tendrils, when we had that in Gatewatch Standard, that was just exile the creatures that died. This
Right.
has that extra line of text. So like if you go to kill something else afterwards, it also gets exiled.
Correct.
I mentioned this card because Infest variants always have a chance to see play. We still have the one from Rivals or from it's Rivals because
Golden Demise or
yeah,
something like
yeah,
that.
Golden Demise. But this against Arclight Phoenix is pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean that's just where it is. Like and now granted, I know a lot of the Drake's deck has moved away from specific Phoenix, but if Arclight Phoenixes are getting you down,
This is one way to keep them down.
yeah. So that's about it with Cry. Next tip, we have everyone's favorite Owen Wilson movie,
This drill bit.
Drill Bit Taylor, right?
Drill Taylor.
I've never seen it. I just know it's a meme.
Yeah. Yeah, you can go ahead.
Drill Bit is 2 generic and a black for a sorcery. It says target player reveals his or her hand, or you choose an on-land card from it, they discard that card. But it does have Spectacle for 1 black, which is if you've dealt damage to your opponent, or your opponent has specifically lost life this turn, you can cast it.
Right.
So I think it's pretty, for a spectacle cost. So at 1 mana, this is better Thoughtseize, unless you're playing like Death Shadow, in which case it's not. But,
It's worse Thoughtseize.
so I think this card's pretty interesting. At 3 mana, you're playing Coercion, and that card is bad.
Yeah.
But at 1 mana, man, I'm a lot closer to being in for it. And it's not hard to turn on in the decks that just want to attack early. So, think about like, we just talked about like the Benthid, for example. We just talked about, Duress is good against these control decks, but maybe you want to make sure that a creature's not coming down, or like Lyra Dawnbringer, which has been a staple for those decks as well, right? Like the ability to, instead of having Duress, right, having a card that gives you any option probably feels pretty good. So I have to feel like this card's going to see play.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously have Duress, but this really feels better in sort of a aggressive shell. So, you're obviously going to be playing something that you have multiple avenues to enable this as soon as possible. You won't necessarily see this. I wouldn't imagine that a mid-range deck would want to be playing this. But yeah, it's a good sideboard option to always be aware of, and being able to take anything is big.
Does an aggressive deck play it in the main?
Potentially.
I mean,
especially if you're looking at something like Arena.
I mean, if it does I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Because if it does a good enough Thoughtseize impersonation in an aggressive deck, like, yeah, Thoughtseize in best of one, it can blow an entire game up.
Yes.
So, man, I don't like best of one.
It definitely makes you look at cards a little bit differently.
Certainly.
And this is one of those cards where it's like, it's efficient. It can be efficient enough to be worth the cost to play in your deck. But it's never dead, necessarily. It can be bad, but it's never... Unless you don't have any cards in hand. Well, then there you go.
It's
the
also
discard's bad.
never boring.
That's true. That's the flavor text of the card, which is...
If you look at the art of that
Chef's
card...
kiss.
Yeah, that person is about to get the drill bit in his head. He's, like, having a good time.
Well, he doesn't. He don't see the drill bit. He's got a blindfold on.
Like, that doesn't look like terror, right? That's a man giggling. That's a teehee.
He seems very elated. That is very true.
I enjoy, like, the Rakdos have gone really deep into this, and it's very good. Where this guy's just like, I want to pay them to do something to me. I don't know what it's going to be.
It'll be a mystery.
Ooh, I get a big old brain cannon.
All right. Next up, we got some Gutter Bones.
Oh, I meant past it. Sorry.
That's fine. Gutter Bones is 1 black, so just a single black for a 2/1 skeleton warrior, and it enters the battlefield tapped. It has an activated ability. It says, generic black, return Gutter Bones from your graveyard to your hand. Activate this ability only during your turn and only if an opponent lost life this turn. So this is another one of the many recursive mono black 1-drops. And this one, the effect is a little bit worse. It doesn't come back to the battlefield, but it can block, which is something that typically these can't. But that's because they come back to the battlefield. So, yeah, it is important because we have probably reached a critical mass where you could probably put together a mono black aggro deck of some persuasion. We still have Death Baron in the format, and this is a skeleton that gets pumped by it. There's a lot of people, good things going for this card.
The thing that makes this card, because when we first looked at this card, we were like, okay, this is the slowest version we've ever seen of this. You know what I mean? At least recently, in the vein that they've done with these. I think the key behind this card is Judith, the Scourge Diva. Because when I first looked at this card, when we first saw it, we hadn't gotten Judith yet. And, Judith makes this a 3/1. And Judith means that when this does die, it definitely shoots something for 1.
Which enables the second part of
exactly. So even if it's getting blocked, you know what I mean? 1 has a much higher chance of trading with something. And 2, you're still going to get a chance to get it back. So I think, like, if I'm evaluating this card, I'm evaluating it in, like, an aristocrat-style aggro deck. And as a 1-drop, it's fine. It's got 2 power for 1 mana, and Recursion's good. So, this card I think is definitely going to see play. It may be the most unexciting version of this. It makes me think of, what was the raid one? From
what? Cons?
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but it was like, but even that one still returned to the battlefield.
Correct.
But you did have to attack. So it was more similar in that vein. But yeah, it'll see play, and Judith makes it better. And also, just shout out to being a skeleton. Normally, we're so used to getting zombies on this. Like, hey, cool skeleton. You mentioned Death Baron. They're good buddies still.
Yeah, so. Exactly.
It's
nice. Next up, we have Orzhov Enforcer.
So this is an innocuous-looking card, but I think it's pretty powerful. A generic and a black for a 1/2. Human Rogue as Death Touch and Afterlife 1.
Yeah.
So a pretty basic card, but man, like, again, 1. this is your aristocrat style card. Like this is just another card that just is a straight 2-for-1. But that Death Touch does such a good job of like either one when you evaluate Death Touch in Rakdos now, you have to evaluate it in terms of Spectacle, because a 1/2 Death Touch reads like unblockable in a lot of part of the games because no one's going to trade with it. Like what? I trade my guy for your creature and you get a spirit, right? But then it becomes much more dangerous to take one because of what you might turn on. You know what I mean? So I think like that alone is pretty powerful. The fact that it is a 2-for-1 in and of itself is good. And just Death Touch also just lets you buy time. Like if you just sit behind it and Rattlesnake for a minute, you can do that too. So
yeah, it's deceptively like simple but powerful, and obviously it's good and limited. And I think it kind of breaks into in standard.
I think so too. I think there's enough cards like this with Afterlife that if we have a couple of okay sacrifice outlets. We have payoffs like Judith. Mardu Aristocrats really looks like it might be a thing. I've seen some Goblin versions of Aristocrats that also seem like a thing. So we have the 2/2 Goblin that you can sacrifice a creature.
Yeah,
like these are the kinds of things that you need for that. So I think it's pretty interesting.
Awesome. Next up, we have Pestilence Spirit. This is 2 generic and a black for a 3/2 skeleton. No, it's not a spirit. Even though there's a skeleton inside of it, it's tricky.
It's skeleton with law farts.
This is a very farty skeleton. He's got some Taco Bell recently, and just like letting it all out. So
he has no skin. How's he gonna hold it in?
It's true. He is living. He is what? Live Moss? Is that?
Oh God! Well, no, he's not alive.
Oh, he's dead. He's dead Moss.
Dead Moss.
Anyway,
¿Por qué, Morgan? ¿Por qué?
This spirit has menace and death touch. Yeah, it's fairly menacing, to be perfectly honest. I'm not gonna.
I don't want to be around this.
I would
boy.
need a friend to deal with that. That is true. And then it says instant and sorcery spells you control have death touch. They got that fart touch.
Fart touch. Who wants to get fourth meal, my friends? We've seen them start to do this sort of thing. We've seen lifelink on a card. In Unstable, we saw trample on a spell, and now we get death touch. And I think that's pretty interesting because this is a 3/2 with menace. It's pretty great. Like to block it, you get to take 2 people out, 2 creatures out with it, so it's good. But there's a lot of cards in Rakdos that you want to play, including one of the split cards. I can't remember which one. The one that deals 1 red.
It's like Carnival.
Yeah, and chaos or something.
Yeah.
But like that becomes just a clean removal spell for 1 mana, and I think that's pretty interesting. And you start looking at a lot of cards a little bit differently like that. If your shock, for example, scales because of this card, how powerful is that? So
not bad.
So and I think it's just like one of those effects that you read it on a card and you're like, okay, that makes sense that makes sense that your spells would be like they have death touch, like it's got like fart spells, and that's cool. So I like it. I got my stink magic.
Next up, we have Priest of the Forgotten Gods.
Now, see, I want to talk about that for a second. It's Priest of Forgotten Gods. Why is there not a the? Is it just because the name's too long? I feel like that demands an article. This is where the grammar person comes out. Where it's like,
I would think you want to say the in there, but I don't know. Maybe
unless it's literally a person named Forgotten Gods. I'm the Priest of Forgotten Gods. The guy from the old late night TV shows.
Maybe that's just like what they call that sort of collective of ancient gods. Maybe they're referred to as worshiping.
I don't know why it wouldn't be though. Whatever, it's fine. Generic and a black for a 1/2 human cleric. It has an ability to tap, sacrifice 2 other creatures you control, any number of target players, each lose 2 life, and sacrifice a creature. You add 2 black to your mana pool and draw a card. So this is one of your sacrifice enablers for aristocrats. It's an awkward one, but we've seen a card like this before in action. What was the morbid one? Skursdag High Priest. Where it would make 5/5 demons.
Right.
And if that card turned on,
if you got to untap with it and you got to enable it, like it was bad news.
Yeah, and like here we have cards with Afterlife where you can really start chaining this for multiple turns. It can ostensibly ramp you into something, which is kind of scary. But also, one of the things Aristocrats is really good at, even if it doesn't have a traditional blood artist, like I said, we have Judith, but is putting you in a board state where you can't really attack because you die in the crackback, but they're gonna keep doing damage to you each turn until you eventually just are whittled away. And this is the card that helps with that. Now, it requires you have a lot of other creatures to do anything, and it certainly is slow because it has to tap to activate. So, I don't know, but people seem to be pretty excited about it. Lists I've seen have been really excited about this card.
Yeah, I think like this is just one of the important factors for that archetype to function. This is one of the better sacrifice outlets that you have. Again, it is awkward, but the payoff is there for sure. Before we move on, I want to give a quick shout out to Rakdos Trumpeter. First of all, good callback to what the Boros one in like original. Also, don't suck the other way on that trumpet. It will not end well for you at all. It's very bad.
Man, I wonder if you got roaring applause for that.
Probably not.
Roaring is an adjective that describes fire.
Fire, I know,
Yeah.
I understand,
Okay,
but still probably not.
Next up is Spawn of Mayhem.
We can talk about the Predator.
This is yours, bud.
All right, Spawn of Mayhem.
No, just Spawn.
I mean, first of all, I do want to give a shout out to Wizards for giving it so many options for alters, because you could obviously just like alter it to look like Spawn, or alter it to look like the Predator, or alter it to look like the guy from the Allstate commercial. Yeah, exactly. There's so many. It's two generic black for a demon creature. It's a 4/4 with flying and trample. It also has Spectacle for 1 black, which is one better.
You should have blocked. You could have avoided spectacled mayhem like me.
And it also has another bit of text on it. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, Spawn of Mayhem deals 1 damage to each player. Then, if you have 10, or less life, putting 1/1 counter on Spawn of Mayhem. So this slices, it dices, it does a bunch of good things.
The amount of times I'm going to lose to this card because my opponent, played Fanatical Firebrand into this stupid card, like, is going to make me so. Or wait for this, right? Your opponent's turn 1 is Skirk Prospector, and they attack you with Skirk Prospector, and they cast this on turn 2, and then I kick them in the chest.
They're like, cool, thanks, idiot. I have a 4/4 flying trample demon that's going to ping you every one of my
turn
turns.
on every single one of my spectacle cards.
Oh, yeah, every single one.
Yeah, I mean, like this. Now, I know we talked about the blue Sphinx being like, oh, that's just a 4/4 for 4, but this is. I want it to be this. I want it to be this forever.
Yeah.
I think the coolest thing about this card is that, as Morgan told me earlier, you can get this in the Rakdos guild kit.
Correct.
So its max price is $15.
Which I think is important. Like, that's a solid rare to be able to get in that and like have some
Mythic.
sort of price. Yeah, a solid mythic rare, excuse me, to get that and have some sort of price control on it. I think that's relevant. But yeah, I think this card's like exactly what you want.
Yeah, this card, the mana base for what you want to do in Rakdos is a little tough because I think the best enablers for an aggressive deck are red based, but you really want double black for this. So it's going to be interesting to see how the builds work.
Yeah.
To like, are you pushing towards this card? What's your payoff? But I think this card is so powerful, you're going to need to have answers for it. And I think when you look at the removal and standard too, it gets a little rough.
Sometimes.
Now, Lava Coil is still very good.
Yes.
But we'll see. Also, shout out to Wizards for making a literal walking meme card, a Thirsty Shade.
100%.
I'm going to throw that Thirsty Shade at you, bro.
Yes. Agreed. Was that our last?
That was our last black card.
I figured everything else here looks kind of like garbage. We do get a bad one-sided Blood Artist.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, yeah. I thought you were going to talk about the Haunt of Hightower for a second.
No, we also get a bad buy a box card. So thank you.
You could definitely buy 90 packs on Arena and get like a play set of these, and this is like. Is that your selling point?
Is that?
Might as well just made it Nexus again. Let's just like at least have something to buy.
Just keep reprinting Nexus of Fate. Just put a new Planeswalker on it every time.
That would actually be unreal.
Just like, hey, just cut to the chase and put Teferi on it, just so like players get it. All right.
Or just like print a mountain that says. A non-foil mountain, but it just says
Nexus of Fate.
The top.
Please.
Oh man.
Please.
If that joke's tough, I'm sorry. They've been using because of the foiling of Nexus of Fate. They've been using mountains as the cards for it, which is just great. On to red.
On the red. Before we get started with red proper, I do want to give a shout out to Amplifier, just for the sheer fact that great name. Very, very proud of you. Also, I have a feeling I'm going to die to this card, and I'm going to be really mad about it. I don't know how yet. I don't know why yet, but I just have a feeling like that could happen. So, just a shout out to my eventual doom to Amplifier.
Yeah, I hope you're not in Constructed. I don't see how you could ever play this card.
You know what?
Unlimited, maybe.
Sure.
I think LSV actually gave it a pretty high rating in his limited review, which that makes sense. It stays that power and toughness until your next turn.
Mm-hmm. Like I said again, I don't know how, I don't know why. I just have a feeling. Just have a feeling about it.
I think it says build a combo deck with me, except for the fact that this is a creature, so you'd reveal it to itself more often than not. Our first red card, though, Hunter, is Daggercaster, a.k.a. Goblin Chain Whirler 2.0, because we needed more of those in the format.
Clearly.
This is 3 generic and a red for a creature Viashino Rogue. This is a 2/3, and when it enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to each opponent and 1 damage to each creature that opponent controls. So it doesn't hit Planeswalkers.
Sure.
So that's awkward.
If you hit Planeswalkers, you're a rare.
That's it. That's the difference. And you are triple red. Yeah. And you have first strike, and you're 3/3. Okay.
We get it.
I think it's weird that we have 2 of these. Why do we have 2 of these? Were they that afraid of Afterlife? I don't think there were that many good Afterlife cards.
I think it makes sense in a limited perspective for Afterlife. It just is unfortunate for people that want to play tokens. They really hated tokens for some reason. When you take a look at a banned card we still have in Standard, the Ferocidon, and now Chain Whirler in this is just like, what do you... I know you printed a good instant speed token card in March of the Multitudes, but dang, you guys are really worried.
And are these good answers to that card?
No.
You should probably just die when they cast that card.
Yes, you still definitely die.
It's weird to have this. It's also weird to have this in again in a limited format where you have a cheap give death touch to a creature spell.
Oh yeah.
But now you have 2 of these effects, and you still have the black green one that did that from the last set. So, I don't know. It's weird. So, you have it. He throws daggers. Or he casts daggers. I actually know what that means. Just I cast level 1 dagger.
All you got to know is that he's got enough for everyone.
That he does. It's where are you keeping those things, Hawkeye?
Don't you worry about it. Here's a dagger.
I do want to mention the art on the card Deface. Have you seen that? This is the first time I've seen it in a really large format. That's a really cool old school style of art.
Yes, it is very. It definitely harkens back to older goblin art that you'd see.
They are defacing a gargoyle, the Gruul art, but you get this goblin face in the bottom corner of the art. That's just the perspective is sweet. So I really really like that art. Card's not playable, but
no, But whatever. Do you have Electro Dominance on here?
I do.
Perfect. So Electro Dominance.
Do I have Electro Dominance
on
here?
I'm just making sure.
Probably the best red card in this set.
It is X red for an instant. It says Electro Dominance deals X damage to any target. You may cast a card with converted mana cost of X or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. So you get to bolt some. You get to Rolling Thunder 1 target because it's instant speed, and then play something.
Yeah,
seems fine.
So in Standard, the card has potential to be pretty good. The fact that you can pay mana to essentially get 2 spells cast for a Phoenix deck or whatever else is interesting. Modern and is Modern Legacy really where this card has a chance to shine, because there's a bunch of spells that we've already forever been trying to cheat into play, like Ancestral Vision. That this card does cheat into play at instant speed.
Yeah.
And that also includes some pretty broken Magic cards. If you go back to Time Spiral, we get Ancestral Vision, as I said. We get Restore Balance, which is a deck that people keep trying to play in Modern no matter what. You also get, it's not Wheel of Fortune, it's something of Fortune, I don't know. But you get a bunch of these spells that...
You get Living End.
And you get Living End, it's also true. I don't know if this is the one you want for Living End or not, but any of them, you get so much more control over what you can do with it, and that's scary. And I don't know, the deck that's trying to combo off that gets just pay 2 mana for a Wheel of Fortune. Oh God.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this is a pretty scary card. Anything that lets you cast things for free always piques people's interest. Just like the card that got counters on it and let you cast cards equal.
So Fate Foretold.
Yes, Fate Foretold. Like that was a deck for quite some time. It got like a little bit of popularity before falling off a little bit.
And now when you could see stuff coming like this, you're just like, oh, I had to turn on Electrodominus. You're like,
Yeah.
oh God, what's happening? Like, what's going to happen?
Why?
So yeah, I think it's scary. I think anytime you get a free, we even saw that in Standard recently when they had all the expertise cards, where a second spell can be, like, oh, that's tough to beat, and here, it could literally be a boat. So I don't know.
Yeah, and just the sheer fact that it scales and it can get you anything is pretty big. So keep your eyes on this.
100%. I want a quick mention of Gates of Blaze. Because you were playing the Gate control deck, then you're probably playing Gates of Blaze.
Yes, you are.
Deals X damage to each creature where X is the number of gates you control. So, and that scales, so that's nice. But our next actual card is Immolation Shaman. And I have no idea what to make of this card.
Neither do I, man. Your bet is as good as mine. It is one generic and a red for a 1/3. And it has the Harsh Mentor ability -1 damage. So it's whenever an opponent activates an ability of an artifact, creature, or land that isn't a man ability, Immolation Shaman deals 1 damage to that player. And then you can pay 3 generic red, and then Immolation Shaman gets +3/+3 and gains Menace until end of turn.
So like they're trying to fit it into the Harsh Mentor category, but make it more playable. Like 2 mana 1/3 lives through a lot more things than a Harsh Mentor did, and the pump ability I guess is nice, but what are we worried about right now with this card? And like what am I supposed to do with it in older formats where I could play Eidolon or something like that?
Nothing.
Oh wait. Oh no, I get it. This confirms our unbanning Splinter Twin.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah, that's it. Confirmed. You heard it here first, everybody.
I doubt it.
If it's unbanned, I'm gonna sound so smart.
Yeah, you're gonna sound like.
And if it is unbanned, I need you to edit out all of me talking about it.
And then if it is unbanned, then people wouldn't they just play Harsh Mentor anyway?
Hey, you shut up. They wouldn't play either of them because they're bad cards.
All right, you got me there.
I do appreciate that Immolation Shaman is definitely doing the Wolverine from the X-Men cartoon in the 90s, like where he like holds his claws apart and he gets like a beam of light between them. Like that's not one of his powers, but if you watch the intro to that show, he definitely does it.
It's just all the cool reflections.
Do Immolation Shaman. That's all I got.
This card is bad.
I don't know if I'll say bad. Like, could something happen in Standard where this matters? Maybe, but I don't see it right now.
Yeah, maybe this is like putting something else in the future in check.
Right. Like Harsh Mentor, people were hyped about it for a little bit, then it didn't do anything, and then it came back with a vengeance and was a staple in versions of the red deck until the red deck rotated. So, there could be enough to make this thing happen. So,
let's talk about a good red card.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for this card. Light of the Stage is 2 generic and a red for a sorcery. Exile the top 2 cards of your library until the end of your next turn. You may play those cards and has Spectacle of 1.
So I played a little bit with this card on Magic Arena, and this card's good.
Yeah, like this is the red divination. Like,
yeah,
the fact that you can play them means you get to hit your land drops. Even like I've already seen. I even haven't played that many games, but I've already seen it where like somebody hit 2 lands. Right, they got to play their land drop that turn and already had it for the next turn, and they didn't have 2 lands on top of their deck. That's what the red aggro deck wants, no matter what.
100%.
So even when you're like just hitting lands, you are super fine with it. And when you hit gas, it is. And the nice thing about this is that you are, if you're trying to dig for lands, you're okay casting this like on turn 3 after your attack, but you're super excited to cast it later and combine it with a burn spell. So I really like this card, and I like how some of these spectacle things are playing. We're gonna get to a card like Theater of Horrors, and we get to multicolored. I really like what they're doing with spectacle, and I think when we first saw it, the card we first saw it on, we'll get to on this list, but I wasn't sure how it would play. But it just plays so naturally with the progression of what Rakdos wants to do that I like it a lot.
Oh yeah,
and it just honestly, when you talk about building shards, it works so well with Riot as well that it makes you pretty happy.
Yeah, I there's nothing that I can like point out about this card that I dislike. It's good on 3. It's fantastic on 1. It slices, it dices, it does like so much. And it could be like a card that potentially means that you don't have to play Experimental Frenzy in your mono red decks, which is a pretty big deal because you could potentially run a little bit leaner.
That's true.
And maybe nix a few lands, play more lower drops, or play more this or that.
Or
like
more of the next card, to be quite
yeah.
honest.
Let's just move on to the next fantastic red card here, which is Rick's Maudie Reveler. So it's a human shaman for 1 and a red, so 1 generic and a red for a 2/2. It says when Rick's Maudie Reveler enters the battlefield, discard a card, then draw a card. And it says if Rick's Maudie Reveler's spectacle cast was paid, instead discard your hand, then draw 3 cards. And it has a spectacle cost of 2 black-red. So obviously it's a multicolored spectacle cost, and it's more expensive, but the effect, I mean, like, as a person who has cast many Bedlam Revelers
So
in their
many
day,
Bedlam Revelers.
that is a fairly good effect.
Yeah, 100%. And if you're building the way you want to build,
exactly,
that's where you want to go.
And like for the mono red deck that's in standard, that's the way they're going to build. They already are trying to play things like the Saga, the Keld, Flames of Keld card, which is hit or miss. Definitely has a very powerful 3rd chapter, but like sometimes that's not what you want. You want the 2nd chapter immediately, and having to wait around for it means that you could potentially get blown up by someone destroying it, and then you're empty-handed, and you could not feel worse about where you are currently. And if you are just trying to like potentially cast this for a spectacle cost in a mono red deck, it's not that hard just to put 4 summits and 4 blood crypts into your mono red deck, and it is not necessarily. You do take a little bit of a hit, but it's not something that you will hopefully see much of.
Pretty negligible.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if you are doing things like this, where you can cast this as a I wanted a red, and then like fix your mana potentially. So.
I also appreciate he's juggling Stalfos skulls. So.
Oh man.
Next up, we got Big Dragon, Skargan Hellkite.
Yeah.
This is 3 generic red.
Yeah, please don't make this 2 generic.
I know.
Red.
I'm so sorry. For a 4/4 creature dragon, it has Riot, it has Flying, and it has an activated ability, 3 generic and a red. Skargan Hellkite deals 2 damage, divided any way you choose among any of 1 or 2 targets. Activate this ability only if it has a +1/+1 counter. So essentially, you get a 4/4 hasty dragon, or you get a 5/5 with a crazy ability. And this is a mythic.
It also has a cool hat.
Yeah, I still don't understand who put that on that. You know what I mean? Like,
again, as I said in our show chat, whoever lost the dare or lost the bet.
All right, Rugthar, you drew the short straw. You get to go put the.
To be fair, I'm pretty sure Rugthar would be like, "All right."
He's just like, "Yeah, okay." It's time to put. Maybe the dragon likes the hat.
Maybe
it's like, "All right, dragon, time to go to war."
It's just like Justin's character in the Adventure Zone Amnesty. He just wants a helmet.
He just wants a helmet, man. He's like, hold on. I got a soft brain. My whole palate is just like soft. Can you give me another skull? Like, yeah, buddy, whatever you need. I now fly at a consistent downward angle, but this is sweet.
Oh man.
I've always wanted a bayonet for a face. Anyways, I think I'm not as high on this as others have been. Like at worst, it's still just a 4/4 haste dragon for 5, which is a mana often uncommon. The last 2 we've seen like this that have been super successful have been Glorybringer, which was busted, and Stormwrath Dragon, which was busted.
Yeah. So this is. I think we just
Thunderbreak Hellkite, which was busted.
So like we've clearly been like spoiled. We've been spoiled by like this slot, the CMC with dragons, at a mythic rare, and with Glorybringer's case at a rare, sort of consistently. So initially, when you look at this card, it's not as big. It's not as like flashy as those other cards. But from everything that I've been reading and consuming, like this card apparently is like the truth. And I'm willing to believe it. I'm willing to believe that it combos well with Domring. I'm willing to believe that it combos well with Rhythm of the Wild, because getting
double Riot does what
getting
you want
multiple
it to
instances
do.
of Riot is where you want to be at with this card. And I really feel like you have to but you should find a way to do that, because making this a 5/5 with haste and being able to have that come in and also be able to activate the ability is where its true power lies. I'm not saying that it's not fine on its normal rate, and I think that Riot is definitely the best mechanic. I think Riot maybe Afterlife will. If Afterlife gets more cards, maybe that'll change. But I really think that Riot is sort of the best mechanic. in the set because it helps make the Gruul decks in Standard work.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think without it, that they would have a hard time existing in the current format. I think Spectacle is also very good, and it definitely encourages the type of play that you want from Rakdos, but I think that you could still make the Rakdos cards work without it, but Gruul needs Riot.
Yeah,
very, very, very much so, and it makes it very, very good because just like the control decks, which is where you're going to have like the hardest time fighting, sometimes like play to resolve your board. That hey, you have an empty board and they are tapped out in some facet, and then you just play a haster and win, and that's why it's so important to have just a bunch of like really good creatures that tacitly can have haste.
Right.
But this card's good. It's going to see a lot of play. There have been a lot of people that have kind of said that Wizard has definitely like gone back on their mythics are splashy and fun and not like constructed playable. Obviously, this card's a beating and limited, and I don't blame them for making this mythic rare because this card will win you a lot of pre-releases or a lot of drafts or a lot of sealeds. But I'm a fan.
All right, last card, Morgan.
All right,
For red.
Last card for red. We have. I assume it's Skewer the Critics.
Oh, it is.
Okay.
It is.
Skewer the Critics. 2 generic and red for sorcery. It says Skewer the Critics deals 3 damage to any target. That sounds a lot like a slow lightning bolt, a slow bolt. But it also has a spectacle cost of 1 red. That sounds definitely a whole lot like lightning bolt. This card is good. It's good in Standard. You have a lot of lightning bolts in Standard currently. You have Wizard's Lightning. You have this, and then you have Lightning Strike. So that's 12.
Yep.
2 of those are genuine bolts.
Yeah, that's true. You also have a black one too, right? Which is 2 mana. Like they lose 3 life and gain 3 life.
So you can make a theoretically a pretty substantial burn deck if you really wanted to. I think to have a good burn deck in Standard, you do need creature lands. So I feel like that is an important part to like that existing.
Well, I do think though that like when you look at you could have like again Theater of Horrors might do a lot and make that an archetype. So.
I mean that's
having 2 hands,
2 hands is definitely better than 1. But I think like
twice the fun. Ask anyone.
I think there's also been a lot of research. There's been a lot of research in how often this is a downside in something like Modern Burn.
Sure.
And it's not very much. That's the thing. Like, the more often than not, you are going to be able to cast this for its spectacle cost, and it might be replacing something like Rift Bolt.
Or Shard Volley.
Or yeah, it could be replacing those cards and like just being purely better.
I think it definitely goes into Pauper Burn.
Yes, 100%.
Because it's very like does this... This is the kind of card where like I start pushing into things like okay, because I know like Needle Drop's a big card in that format. Like yeah, it's kind of interesting.
I think you still need Needle Drop because I think like drawing cards is good, but there are plenty of other things that you could take out of that deck and like have this. And like Pauper Burn is interesting because you have a lot of creatures that like you have like the Galvanic guy that's just like enabled. Like I just have a creature that just turns this on automatically.
Oh, like I pinged you. That's weird.
Nothing else can come of this, surely. I'll cast the sorcery and untap my guy.
I also love the flavor of this card that just like implies that like you go to like the Rakdos Theater and there's the critic. There's like the art. Well, I think this season's the Lion King performed by the Rakdos Guild was absurd and boring, and I'm currently bleeding in my chest.
I just assume that this daredevil looking Rakdos person is just like got a heckler and just taking him out.
If you look at the flavor text, it actually says like you can't leave early. So someone's like heading for the door and they're like, "Oh, I'm not done.
I'm not done yet."
But I just like the idea of just like it's
Eat
like
candelabra.
It's like Albert died. Well, what happened? Well, did you see his scathing critique in the Ravnica Times?
Yeah, I think this card is good, and I'm glad it's common. I'm glad they can go in Pauper. I'm glad I'll probably want to get a foil playset of them for Modern Burn.
Ooh.
And I'll play them at some point in time in my life.
All right, last of the mono colors here, green.
All right, so. Please tell me, do you have
Biogenic Ooze?
Yes, you could read Biogenic.
All right, are you sure? Because it's an ooze, and I know.
I love Biogenic Ooze. I've been looking at this card and being like, I want to play this card.
Biogenic Ooze, 3 generic green for a 2/2 creature ooze. When it enters the battlefield, create a 2/2 ooze token. At the beginning of your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on each ooze you control, and then for a generic green, you can create a 2/2 ooze creature token. So. This card is a mythic, and I'm
Right.
very glad because in limited,
Oh god,
this
this
card is
miserable.
unbelievably busted.
Oh,
I
man.
think in standard though, it has a chance because I'm going to talk about a little card that's a little later down on the list called Wilderness Reclamation,
Oh,
where you get to untap your lands every turn, and I want an activated ability that I get to use those lands on, and making oozes seems pretty great. But if you get to play this on the turn where your opponent can't like do anything about it, you end up with a 6/6 worth of power that just keeps getting bigger and threatens to be more. And the creatures like this where it looks for it's like yeah okay it's a 2/2 for 5. It's like well you get the second body, but two like this demands an answer. Like if this is your last threat, this demands an answer. And I think we saw cards even like Tendershoot Dryad, like jump up in price. Not just specific for standard applications ultimately, but a card like that where, man, if you are able to like navigate the game correctly, this gets gross. But I think compared to even like Tendershoot Dryad, these in multiples. Right? Where it's like, oh, you killed the actual biogenic ooze. Oh, I had a second one, and I made another ooze token. And the other ooze token was still here, and the party grows.
I brought all my friends, and I keep making friends.
All my rowdy ooze coming over tonight.
It is important to note, this is something that just clicked in my brain. We have this card called Prime Speaker Vanifar.
Oh, definitely an ooze.
It's definitely an elf ooze wizard.
Ivan ooze.
This is kind of a weird target for that card. So that card acts like Birthing Pod.
Right.
This comes in and brings a friend, and you can restart your chain if you need to.
Yep.
Which is kind of important. And
this
also...
This is what Vanifar's been making, or this is what Vanifar came from?
one and the same. One and the
This is the
same.
Super Mario Brothers movie, and this is the King of the Mushroom Kingdom.
Basically, but... yes, I like this card. I want it to be playable in some facet, and then I want to play it all the time.
I just want to keep playing it.
Over
forever.
and over and over again.
Yeah, it's
Big fan, much like.
And I think like we look at some of the green cards here, specifically a mana creature we're going to look at here in a second too. Like there's some cards that play well with this for sure. So next up, we got Big Pigs.
Yeah, we have Endraiser Forerunners, which is 5 generic.
Which is a Toyota SUV.
Correct. That's the new Endraise model. Very high end. I can go off road, on road, in road.
It has tusks for some reason.
Be careful if you drive it. And this Serengeti, a hunter might shoot you.
It's got a little like warning sticker on the dashboard. Do not drive in high poaching areas.
Correct. Anyway, this is 5 generic green for a 7/7 boar creature. Creatures, really. I mean, there's more than one, but
There are multiple Gruul cards that have many pigs.
It is very bacon themed. This has Vigilance, Trample, and Haste. It says when this creature enters the battlefield, other creatures you control gain +2/+2 and gain Vigilance, Trample, Vigilance, Trample till end of turn. So this reminds us a lot of a card that we know and is obviously a cube staple, which is Crater Behemoth. Now, if you gave me this card and you also gave me a bunch of mana elves and a card that could easily bring it back from the graveyard, we might have a stew going. That you could like flash back and also a bunch of easy ways to put it into the graveyard. I'm just saying, if you gave me this in a shell that also was called Junk Reanimator, I'd be very excited.
I think the elves part exists. Like there's already an elf ball deck that does exist in standard.
Yes.
And this seems to fit in as a pretty good top end to it. But I think again, what Green is trying to do, like this, we thought we were going to see this when we had this in Eldritch Moon. What was the we had the Emerge one,
right?
I can't remember what it's called, but it didn't really pan out in that format. But this one, I think the format is a little more friendly to it. So I think you're going to see some big pigs doing some. They're not going to replace the behemoth anywhere else.
No, not at all.
But in standard, it's and I agree. Like you mentioned, bringing it back, like. Yeah, like this is that kind of card that has some spicy reanimation targets, and
yep,
we could see. Next up is our cool crab boy.
Yeah, Growth Shaper Guardian. So 1 generic for a 2/2 elf crab warrior. Warriors.
Wow. I got it.
And it has Adapt. 2 generic and a green for Adapt 2. And it says whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on this creature, you may search your library for a card named Growth Chamber Guardian, reveal it and put it in your hand, then shuffle your library. I have played with this card. I played with it in a mono green Gruul deck, so it's pretty much mono green splashing like Rhythm of the Wild. It's real good when you can do that because it works really well with Riot. You get to Riot and put a +1/+1 counter on it. Obviously, you can't make it a 4/4, but you just get another one, and it's good.
Yeah,
It's very good.
yeah.
And I think like this is in a lot of decks is just going to be an upgrade to Branchwalker, in being able to like play it with like a Llanowar Elf out and being able to potentially adapt it and play something else with it is a big deal. And like swinging off for 4 on turn 3 is still pretty substantial in this format. And I just really like it. Even if you're just mono green, like you're playing this card because it's card advantage as well.
Yeah, and I think like adapt solves one of the problems that mono green like had even in the last format, which is what do you do with this mana when we just have dudes?
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So this is sort of the perfect card for that. Next up is the card I referred to or referenced before, which is Incubation Druid. It's a 1 and a green for a creature Elf Druid. It's a 0/2 and it says tap. Add 1 mana of any type of land you control could produce. So we get that reflecting pool thing. And then it has Adapt 3 for 3 generic green. So you put 3+1/+1 counters on it. And that tap ability says if you have a +1/+1 counter on Incubation Druid, add 3 mana of that type to your mana pool. So there's a couple ways you can play with this card. Like one, as a 0/2, like the comparison was to like Utopia Tree, right?
Yeah.
Which was a Birds of Paradise that had 2 toughness. In this case, it's not Birds of Paradise, but you don't need it to be if you're just tapping within your colors for the most part. Its adaptability makes it a 3/5, which is powerful. But the key here is there are definitely ways to get counters on it earlier too, and then you can start doing some busted ramp.
Yes.
So, and this card and our Ooze friend, as I mentioned, when this is adding 3 mana, and then Ooze takes 4 to activate, like these two guys are doing a really slimy high five. So,
yeah, I think like this card is definitely one of those cards that maybe some people are sleeping on, but like you definitely need to pay attention to
the
this.
people in the pods and
they're probably pretty sleepy in some sort of stasis of some persuasion. But this card, anything that can generate like that much mana can do. Like there was that 1 mana creature that cost like 3 and only made mana that you could use to cast creatures with, and still saw play.
Yeah, it was.
This doesn't cast anything.
Yeah, it was a 1/2, right?
Yeah,
100%.
So
and I think this card is gross powerful, and just like, and again, like you mentioned before, just like the last guy, like with the Gruul enchantment, for example, like giving this Riot is just like.
Oh, and this card is disgusting with double instances of Riot. I don't know how you're doing it, and you're probably just winning more after that. But giving this thing like haste and a +1/+1 counter is like, you did it.
It's like I'm gonna cast the next thing.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it's really cool. I've gotten to play with it in limited. I was telling Morgan about this. So, like that card and the 3/3 blue-green lizard that you can move counters off of, right? So you play this and then you adapt it, and then you play the 3/3 thing, take all its counters, make it a 9/9, and you just adapt that thing again. He's like, okay. So it's pretty great. We're only gonna talk about one more green card though.
Oh,
yeah, awkward. And that's Wilderness Reclamation. This card is gross, right?
yes. There have been already multiple instances of this being very frustrating in Best of One in Arena because of Bant Nexus. It's really good when you basically speed up Bant Nexus by a few turns.
Yeah, we should. So it's 3 generic and a green for an enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, untap all lands you control. It should be noted that in multiple times in Magic's history, that effect has been very powerful. Seedborn Muse is a very powerful card when it was first printed, and both Seedborn Muse and then what was the blue-green one? Prophet of Krufix.
Yeah.
Have both been like commander staples. I do believe Prophet Krufix is banned in Commander.
I think so.
Like they're it's a very powerful effect. But what Morgan's talking about here is that the way that it's a trigger, right? So if you play this for 4 mana, say you're at 4 mana, right? And Nexus costs 7. So at the end of your turn, you can, with the trigger on the stack, you can float your mana, untap, and then cast Nexus, and you could start chaining them much earlier than you would normally, which is. Honestly, disgusting. It really is.
Yeah. So what you cast this potentially early? You could cast this on
like turn 3.
Turn 3 potentially,
and then start casting Nexus on 4.
Yes.
Yeah, that's gross. But more, like in addition to that too, it lets you do some things. A lot of those lists we've seen updated versions are running things like Karn and things like this, where you can do that and then still hold up your fogs or your Settle the Wreckages if you're playing Wilderness Reclamation. So you have to devote a slot to do nothing enchantment, like you have to do that. But it's really gross.
And it's just free. Like that.
Yeah.
That
well,
is
it's cost 4 mana.
well, but you untap those lands.
You do untap. Yeah. No, it doesn't stop you from like if you want to do something on your opponent's turn, it does not stop you.
Right.
And I think like enough people in Standard have played against Teferi already long enough to know that like even if you think the tap's low, those 2 untapped lands represent too much. You're gonna be like it's dangerous, and this card does that too. So. Wordless Reclamation is just a dangerous Magic card, and it amazes me what cards. For limited, it probably doesn't matter too much, though. It's very good with Adapt, for example. It amazes me that like some of the cards that got bumped up to rare because of Addendum, but like how like this effect is just like we're uncommon.
Uncommon, yeah, whatever.
It's like, huh?
Again, it's something that isn't necessarily busted in limited. I don't know how good this is in limited. To be perfectly honest, it could be really good. I honestly have no clue. So, what?
Sorry, I just like as I'm looking at the spoiler, Territory of Boar has a really random Legends name on it. This Yiva Nature's Herald is being quoted on the flavor text. Do you remember that card?
Oh, is that yeah? No,
it's one of the core set legends that like everything flash. I did not know that she was even on Ravnica.
I guess I never paid attention to her origin story, but apparently she's a Ravnican.
Oh, fair enough. That was okay. Cool. Random. I know that's weird, but interesting. Man, I'm going to do this as I always do. If you don't listen to the Vorthos cast, you really should. They're going to do their flavor episode based on Ravnica. It's going to be sweet. Because they're going to tell us those little tidbits. I'm going to go, oh, man.
Yeah. But yeah, this card is problematic. I think like it's problematic for a little bit because right now you can only play constructed best of 1 to ladder in that currently for preseason.
How long is that true for though?
It stops at the end of July. Not
oh my gosh!
End of January. Excuse
okay,
me. The
so
new season starts in February.
Okay.
And then you can play best of 3. Now best of 3, obviously, you do have more options in it because you have a sideboard to deal with the Bant Nexus or the other Nexus lists. So like. For a little bit, this might be a bit of a tiresome thing if you're really trying to ladder currently in preseason and get to Mythic or what have you. But I assume in something when you have access to a sideboard, you'll fare a little bit better against these sort of strategies. But yeah, so we've gone through all of the monocolored cards, all the lands, and all of the colorless cards. And now we are going to move into the multicolored cards. We're actually going to save that to episode 250B, if you will.
The B side, you know.
Because there are a lot of multicolored cards.
There's more multicolored cards by a little bit than all of the ones we just talked
correct.
about.
So it's easier for you to consume if we just kind of break it into 2 episodes. So we'll wrap this one up. If you do have any other questions or concerns, or you want to reach out to us, you do have multiple methods of doing so. You can reach out to us on Twitter. It's our handle is YourEndStep, and when you add us, it's at YourEndStep. We also do have an email address at YourEndStep@gmail.com, or we have a Facebook. It's just facebook.com/@YourEndStep. We, of course, want to give a shout-out to our lovely sponsor, Comic Town. They are, of course, going to be running their pre-releases, but it's a bit of a snowstorm that's going to be happening over the weekend here in good old Central Ohio. So I'm not sure. You might want to stay abreast on what's going on. Check out their Facebook page, facebook.com/ComicTown. If there are any last-minute changes to any other pre-releases, if you are in an area that is affected by what's happening over the weekend, definitely stay safe. Your pre-release is not worth putting yourself in danger. I'm going to reinforce that. Stay home, stay safe, and don't do anything foolish to be out there in the pre-releases. But if you are in an area that is currently very clear of snow, enjoy your pre-releases. We also want to give, again, a shout-out to Legit MTG, who's going to be one of our featured hosts of our show. It's going to be going up weekly when we release them. So I know that if you aren't familiar with them, I know Mike has written them for a few times, and a few friends of our show actually are writers as well. Shout-out to Billy from Philly.
Right. Always enjoy those pieces.
And we are very honored to have them be a featured host of the show. So definitely check out some of their lovely Magic content. They kind of have content for a little bit of everything. A lot of competitive stuff, obviously, but some other nice features on there as well.
Their editor Josh Glazer also edits Pure MTG.
Yeah.
Or Pure MTGO, I should say. And he's a good guy. He cultivates a lot of writers and does a good job keeping a community. So
thank you. We also, of course, have our own personal feed. So if you want, you can subscribe to us on iTunes or whatever podcast program you choose to use. If you are using one of your Apple products, please feel free to give us a rating or a review. We also, of course, have a Patreon if you want to listen to the show via that method.
You gotta get better about saying that first.
It goes up free for everyone, and we do have some awesome bonuses if you do decide to become a patron. We appreciate all of our patrons. They really help us produce the show month in and month out for hosting and everything like that. So thank you personally to every one of our lovely patrons. But that's going to be everything for this episode. We will catch you guys next time, and you have a great one. Bye.